my 3 days of the CentreCourt MBA Festival are coming to an end. I still think that we're Tuesday, but here we are on a Thursday afternoon, and we wanted to go out on a high note. So we've brought together a wonderfully experienced careers panel to share with you, and perhaps get a snapshot of the class of 22 and the tremendous opportunities that they're considering, enjoying, and about to go and pursue. So I'm very happy to welcome Jeff McNish. Jeff is the Assistant Dean in the Career Center at the University of Virginia's Darden School, with a very futuristic vision of what Los Angeles might look like. Joining us from the West Coast, Mefteh Shebi. Mef is the Director of MBA Career Advising at the Parker Career Center at UCLA Anderson. Kali Eskew. Kali is the Director of Graduate Business Career Services at the University of Florida in the Warrington School. And then Steve Ruckus, who is the Executive Director of the Masters Career Center. We've often met many of the advisors on the master's programs at the Tepper School at CMU. And Jeff, given your industry experience, you were saying before we went live that this has been a very strong year, if not one of the strongest years. So the class of 22 had great options. Tell us a little bit about the market that you've seen this year.
Well, I think it was incredible in that recruiting happened, and a lot of recruiting happened virtually, which allowed many more students and many more companies to come together. I think that, combined with just the job market in general, set us up for a record-breaking year in many dimensions. I think it was like you mentioned, it was probably one, or will go down as one of the best years to come out of business school. We're really excited about the future, though. But there is some uncertainty. But we are really coming off a great MBA recruiting year with this class of 2022.
And when you measure that, Jeff, of course, there are salaries. You talked about the consulting firms that were, had a particularly strong appetite for your graduates. What are some of the other measures that you look at when you've given all of these individuals and their very personal goals? What are some of the things that you think are a great measure of a successful year?
Well, looking at the timing of whether students are landing opportunities within a certain window of time after they finish the degree, because many of them want to jump right in and start using what they've learned in the classroom. We track whether or not their career goals have been met, so we know what they come in looking for, and then look to see what happens when they leave. How many of them really come in wanting consulting and in consulting. And then probably the other measure that I think is really important is their engagement with us as they go out, because we rely on recent graduates to kind of come back and help us bring the next set of students through the process. And I think one element that isn't really measured by a particular number. It's just we have strong relationships with our students as they graduate, because we rely on them to kind of come back and help us bring the next set of students through the process.
Right. Kali, you were mentioning, and perhaps true, and not just for the consulting industry, but across sectors, the virtual model that, of course, was very much in place during the last 2 years has also meant that that sort of interaction has been nationwide, if not international, and opportunities that your graduates at Florida are exploring.
Yeah, it really benefited small programs like ours. I think for firms that really had to establish 2 or 3 top core schools where they would invest heavily in visiting. And you mentioned earlier, lavish events and dinners and breakfasts and things like that. Last couple of years, Florida has really benefited from the expansion of those target schools, if you will, or at least having virtual events that are cross schools. So our employer diversification has gone up, and we're really excited about that. We think that means that, students are landing with firms where we don't already have deep relationships with, but they're hitting their goal, as Jeff mentioned. So in some ways it's really benefited our students, and we're excited to continue riding that momentum this year.
Right. Steve, you mentioned close to 2 in 5 of Tepper graduates this year went into consulting, beyond what has always, of course, been a very strong demand from the industry. What else are you seeing? Tech, healthcare, are there other sectors that have shown particularly strong demand?
Yeah, we've always had a strong foothold in tech, and that's continued. But for the past few years, consulting has surpassed tech. It looks more like it did maybe in the early part of the last decade. And I think with more consulting opportunities available, as my colleagues have said, we see more students starting their careers in consulting. Now, that's often an industry where folks, it has a wide funnel and a narrower top, so they may eventually move out to other industries if they don't grow within the firms. But we continue to see strong demand from tech and the emerging healthcare sector too. There's quite a bit of that. We're doing some sponsored coursework and some work at the business school with companies like Moderna and Vertex and others. So we're really interested in attracting candidates who are interested in healthcare as well as the other top sectors.
Right. Jeff had mentioned this idea of, looking at as candidates come in and their perhaps their post-MBA career goals at that early stage, and then the outcomes that they enjoy. There's an understandable emphasis on the first position. As you say, they're eager to get started and put all of these great things to practice. But you see that more as a stepping stone. Consulting would be a good example of consolidating the 2-year experience at Tepper to then, continue to contribute to the next steps they're going to be making.
Mm-hmm. Yes, absolutely. I think you would get a great foundation across industries and functions and bring a skill set of problem solving and collaboration to your next role that a lot of employers greatly value.
Right. Well, Mef, with that futuristic background, perhaps looking into the future, what have you seen both of the snapshot of the class of 2022 and what you feel that implies moving forward?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for inviting us and having this conversation. I would say, in contrast to everything that's been said here, Anderson students tend to focus more on the tech space here. So wide-ranging interest in the technology space, anywhere from big tech to medium-sized tech to startups is an area of interest for a lot of students here. In addition to that, I would also emphasize sustainability. So clean energy, clean tech is a growing space, especially in California. And then and obviously entertainment being kind of the hub here. Entertainment tech is another area. So this intersection of tech with different sectors of healthcare, real estate, clean tech, energy, is an area of interest for a lot of students at Anderson. And as a result of that, you have varying recruitment timelines. So, as everyone alluded to, consulting kind of, wrapping up early. With tech, you can get a wide range in terms of when recruiting will wrap up. And we've seen that with the class of 22, especially with just-in-time recruiting for some of the smaller startups or, clean energy, real estate, that space. So sometimes students will likely even recruit beyond graduation. Even though our numbers were strong, we're at 92%, like 3 months out. I would say that was something that I guess that we've observed at Anderson is students have these wide-ranging interests within the tech space, and the timeline could vary significantly.
And if the heavyweights, the big four, MBB, perhaps the banks, might be coming onto any of your campuses to recruit considerable numbers of graduates, how do you then also ensure at Anderson that perhaps that more niche career move can also then be facilitated, and how you accompany those students?
Yeah, so, I think one of our differentiating, qualities that the Parker team or the Parker advising team takes is, we are very much personalized and individualized in our coaching services. I think that's what we're known for, is getting to know each and every student at the individual level and understand their personal characteristics, their values, their competencies, and how does all of those align with what they're targeting. We have students, each student is assigned a Parker career advisor by industry and function. So all of our career advisors are industry aligned based on their experience. So that helps us to get to know the student right from the start in terms of their interest. Is it realistic? Is it practical? What are the gaps involved? And really lay out a plan for them so that if their target is consulting and that's what they're going for, like laying out a strategic plan or career plan, action plan that they can execute against. And if it turns out that they pivot later, what alternatives, what other parallel paths can they explore? And the tech space tends to offer quite a considerable parallels to internal strategy or strategic type of roles. So that's how we work with them.
Right, getting to know the students. It strikes me that your teams know everybody on a first name basis. You probably know more about them than anybody else on the campus. Now, at Darden, that would start with Donna Clark and her admissions team, and the content of those applications. But then they're admitted. So, Jeff, when does your relation start with them? And looking at what they might have shared as their initial goals, how you then hold up a mirror to those goals and encourage them to explore.
Yeah. So at Darden, Donna's office is just on the other side. We are next to each other and collaborate very closely on the career goals and the admissions goals to bring together a very unique class that helps advance what we're trying to do here at Darden. We have a number of early, what I will call broadly early admit programs. And our career team is right in there with Donna and her team as she goes through the admissions process. I mentioned this has been a record-breaking year for outcomes. I would argue the last couple of years has been record-breaking in that we are working with admitted students earlier and earlier and earlier because of the recruiting cycle. It's really kind of crazy that there are some MBAs that will start interviewing for MBA internships before they've even made their final deposit to go to business school. I'm not a big fan of that trend, to be honest with you, because I think one of the exciting things about business school is you get to come here and meet your classmates and meet faculty and start learning things, and then take that interaction, that learning, and use it into a career goal. But the early recruiting is I think is a trend that we've seen, and we jump right in there, building the relationships, as Meth said, with the students, and walking them through their career journey, whether they start it right after they've been admitted, all the way up until the time we start our program in the fall.
Right. I mean, there could be 40, 60, 80 other classmates looking at balance sheets or an accounting class. But Carly, what you offer is incredibly personalized to each individual. So, from what Meth was saying at the Parker Center and Jeff was describing at Darden, very similar, getting to know them. But it really, tell us a little bit about the coaches and their backgrounds and passions, to make this magic work so well.
I'm happy to. And I would actually, just to echo what Jeff was saying about how closely we work with admissions, for our full-time candidates, our business career services team sits in on 100% of those one-on-one interviews. And I think that makes us sort of differentiates us a bit. And taking that a step further, I personally speak with the vast majority of them as well prior to their admission. And so that makes it really intimate for us in terms of, being there with them from day one, helping to admit them into the program and starting to work with them as early as possible. I'm the primary career coach for all the full-time MBA students. So when you talk about the passion of the coaches, I can speak to my own, of course, but for me, it's deeply personal. I'm an alum of this program, and the full-time MBA program at the University of Florida quite literally changed the trajectory of my career. And so helping these students increase the value of my degree is something that I love spending time doing. What I would say in terms of early engagement and getting to know those students earlier, similar to what everybody is experiencing, we're offering the opportunity to engage earlier and earlier. Prior to this year, I basically told students in admissions interviews, we'll engage as early as you'd like. just reach out. But this last year was the first year where I actually had to do some batch programming over the summer in order to be able to meet all those requests. So we had something called a summer sprint that our MBA students were able to join in groups so that they were fully onboarded before they were in orientation. So very similar approach, it sounds like, from the other individuals on the call. And yeah, this last year was pretty incredible in terms of the proactive demand from the students to get up to speed faster and faster. And I think we're seeing that already play out in this recruitment season and how ready they were and their early results.
Right. I'm wondering, Steve, if there's any tough love involved, and perhaps that's not the best way to describe it. You know, you've got all of these incredibly enthusiastic individuals that are arriving at Tepper, and there the business school sits, you know, on the campus surrounded by, you know, artificial intelligence and computer labs and just everything else that's going on at the university. And they're saying, no, I know this is what I want, and there's this one path. How do you encourage them, you know, to open up that vision? Because there are so many opportunities that Tepper graduates could enjoy.
Right. I almost see two extremes sometimes. We have students who are very impacted by FOMO and want to try to do everything. Right. And that's one set of challenges that we work with. But then for the others who might have a more narrower view that you're talking about, we treat them the same initially. We have the same issues that Jeff and Carly and Meth have as far as earlier and earlier access. We formalized tracks within the onboarding process. So in other words, if you're with Consortium or Forte or some of the earlier groups, this is your timeline. If you are, you know, pursuing something more immediate like consulting and banking, this is your timeline, and so on and so forth. So part of what we impart, our coaches are also industry experts and assigned to those verticals. And so we try to create that match for at least their plan A, right? So they understand what the timeline and commitments are. And so that will naturally allow some groups to have more time to explore than others. Right. So there's that. If you're pursuing investment banking, you may not have as much time to explore and sample all these things you're talking about. But then that's, you know, the trade-off of that is investment banking is concluded earlier. And so if you do find yourself in plan B, there's a ton of things you can do. Right. So we really meet them where they are. And because our program is smaller and we have a pretty healthy ratio student counselor, we're able to get to know them quickly and, you know, just have that sensory experience of, you know, who needs a little more support, who needs maybe some guidance to focus, who needs some guidance to broaden, and then ultimately they're all going to be successful in one way or another, and just help them along that path.
Yeah, and candidates, Meth, that, you know, they've worked hard through their undergrad, perhaps the last 3, 4, 5, 6 years, you know, in the early stages of their career, and then suddenly they're taking this break to head to business school. So there's great opportunity for exploration on their personal journey of development. What are the tools, assessments that you can then use to help them identify maybe skill sets, particular passions that emerge, and you know, the career opportunities that might then fit them very well?
Yeah, I would say probably everyone here will probably agree with kind of the resources and tools that we use. There is a lot of commonality in terms of, for example, self-assessment tools like Career Leader that we use to help students identify their, you know, motivators, interests, skills, and try to see what alignment there is between their characteristics and the opportunities they pursue. Other tools like Strength Finder, Big Five, like there are many different tools. And I think the key message I want to emphasize, though, is, you know, the tools provide data and provide input. And our goal is to sit with each of our advisees. So like I said, we have students are assigned to a Parker advisor, so there is accountability and ownership. So we meet with them one-on-one to look at what the input from all these tools and resources are highlighting. So using that data, using that information about their self-assessment, their self-evaluation, to figure out, you know, what are the opportunities that align well with their characteristics. What does building a relationship in the communities that they're targeting, whether it's recruiting for consulting or recruiting for tech or recruiting for any other function or industry that they're interested in, what does what does that path look like, and then actually going and testing and evaluating and validating whether their kind of their perception, their direction is aligned with kind of the reality of the marketplace. So that's how we work with them. Yeah.
Got it. And Jeff, you had mentioned the importance of alumni in this, and relying on those fairly recent graduates coming back and support. So how are alumni then involved? Is it to give insights into a particular industry based on their experience, and give people a taste of what it might be like to be a banker, consultant, or product manager?
That's certainly part of the process. I think our students will engage alumni maybe at the very beginning, just to get a feel or a sense of what the career path might look like. Then kind of moving through the process, maybe a little more in-depth information to make a decision about whether, as Steve mentioned, a plan A, which is what an industry or sector that they're targeting. Moving along from exploring and deciding to go for it, if you will, to help with interview prep, and getting ready to do the formal engagement to get the offer. And then, the last stage is certainly the alumni that are helping their organizations recruit Darden talent, for example. They're on the phone, they're on email, encouraging the people they've made offers to join the firm, and then really helping them on board and championing their careers as they get started. So we see alumni helping in all stages of it, and we've got an incredible alumni base that is willing and ready to jump in and engage our students at whatever stage of the process they're in.
Right, Carly, you're perhaps the ultimate Florida alumna example of supporting students, but the great job market this year. But I'm also often struck, if we go back to 2010, 11, or the dot-com bubble bursting 20 years ago, that's also where alums are playing a role. They're very proactive to sort of reach out. Hey, the hiring at my firm. Is that something that you witness both in the good times and the more challenging times?
Absolutely. Going back to the class of 20, we sent out a sort of a Hail Mary. Students are having a rough time. Alumni, do you know of any opportunities? And we realized pretty quickly that we didn't have a great process in place for everybody responding to that. So we got a really great response to that in a lower job market, if you will. But even, I'm glad that you asked that question right now, because literally tonight, in a few hours, we're having 6 alumni come and speak from a very well-known tech firm. And we didn't ask them to. They banded together and said, look, I know Gators aren't a target for this firm, but we want to tell you everything we know about how to get into this firm. That's totally on the alum. I didn't put it together. Basically, I've been sending the link to other Gators. So it's this very hungry, even when you're 2 or 3 years out, remembering what the program did for you and doing everything possible and then some to help current students. Being a part of the SEC, we are well known to be a competitive bunch here, and we sort of treat recruitment as if it's a team sport, and Gators certainly help Gators.
That's and that, I'm sure, we talk about the lifelong friendships, but that passion of the alumni that Jeff was describing in Charlottesville, and your Gators proactively organizing events like that, it really is a phenomenal network that they're then enjoying. Jeff had mentioned, Steve, that the alum might be involved in interview prep and getting people ready for that, which sort of brings me to the softer skills. You've got all of those analytical, more the hard skills that are part of the core curriculum. But how are you then, and through the Career Center, also teaching softer skills, communication, effective networking, coming across well in an interview, to balance with those hard skills?
Yeah, we have a program at the Career Center that we teach that includes those skills. We're working with them pre-matriculation on things in a sequential order. So, starting with a good elevator pitch, a good resume, and then moving into, tell me about yourself. And then, how do you tackle these types of interview questions? So there's a lot of what I would call 360-degree support between our team, peer coaches, our Accelerate Leadership Center, which is pretty unique at the Tepper School, and then the alumni come in at all levels. We have alumni who are, particularly interested in talking to prospective students. Then we have other alumni who get more involved in hosting treks and corporate events. And so we sort of want them to engage where they're comfortable and want to meet the students. So we're all focused on that because there is a bit of that stereotype of an analytical problem solver type candidate coming from Tepper, but we've worked really hard to support the students with the soft skills, the teamwork skills. Teamwork's a big part of our curriculum, our student organization structure, and our social aspects at Tepper. So we're really working to make sure the students are well-rounded. And it's part of the intelligent future that you see above me here. It's, a simple concept that the future will be managed by humans using these incredible tools, but they're humans first, right?
Right. And the idea of a recruiter MEF that would come and say, I want to see 10, 15, 20 resumes, and they're coming back year after year. Is it that they all will often identify certain characteristics in Anderson graduates that they particularly appreciate?
Yes, absolutely. Consistently, what we hear from employers is that our students are very really embody this philosophy of shared success, which emanates throughout the Anderson culture. We're all about shared success. We're all about community. Time and time again, what we hear from employers is that Anderson students are very collaborative, very team-oriented. And I think based on the programming we do, similar to what Steve mentioned, we have, very structured programs. They go through a 4-credit Parker Career Series course that all of them are required to take as part of their core curriculum. And we emphasize these soft skills as well, right? Like, how do you collaborate? How can you be collaborative in a very diverse workforce? How can you, build up your communication skills in terms of articulating your value, your story, things like that is very much embedded in the design of the programs and the workshops that we do. The feedback we're getting from employers is really validating the work we're doing as far as, making sure that we essentially take that cultural value anywhere we go, the collaborative and the team orientation values.
Right. This sort of what companies are looking for. And Jeff, I'll send this question your way, given that the Dean, Scott Beardsley, of course, himself was a former senior figure at McKinsey. A recruiter at McKinsey once said, yes, we want people with great analytical number skills, potential for leadership, but we love to see humility too. Now, again, these sort of characteristics, we talk about people that need to adapt. And after you've done 320 cases at Darden, you can probably land on your feet. Do you think that for today's job market, there are these fundamental characteristics that will always serve your graduates well?
Wholeheartedly agree. Echoing what Matt had shared, and I was just jotting down some things when I hear what recruiters talk about from our students, especially because of the case method. And certainly humility is, as you mentioned, is definitely a soft skill or a presence that I think MBA or future leaders need to have. But I would add, having a point of view, taking a point of view with limited information, thinking on your feet, being able to sort of take in some information and then start to formulate an idea, a solution, and then having others build on your idea to come up with a solution. Those are just a few examples. I think the Darden students sort of walk away from the case experience that we have. The one characteristic that I really like to see in our students is the art of persuasion. You're in a classroom with 69 other classmates. And your job is to persuade all of them that your point of view on or your answer to, say, a cold call question helps lead to a solution. And I think the art of persuasion is definitely something that can help a future leader get things done in today's business environment.
I suspect that all 4 of you have probably taken in a course like that? There's a lot of understandable focus on that first position, but if we think about such a cosmopolitan community in Florida, Carly, a stepping stone, and what will probably also then become a very international career. You know, they might start domestically, but then, you know, in Latin America and other parts of the world. How can you continue to support your graduates as they might then, you know, be heading to far-flung positions?
So I think just given our ratios here, and again, the benefit of the size of our program, we develop deep relationships with them. So we don't have formal, you know, if you're an alum, here's who you contact. It's more like when they're here, we get to know them well. They learn to trust us. They know us very well, and they reach out to us, you know, whenever they're ready to make a move, or they don't, because they've learned the skills to sort of go out and make those connections while they're here. But I would say I benefited from reaching out to the career office even as an alum prior to my coming back to Florida. It's pretty organic at Florida, so I'm not going to be able to describe a branded program for alumni, and that's just because it's heavily weighted on the relationships that they gain with our office.
Right. I'm going to go back to the intelligent future, Steve. You've brought it in as a theme, visually and orally. And for all of our viewers from all over the world that are thinking about business school, you know, they're thinking about the different skills that they'll develop. Now, all four of you are involved, no doubt, in this mammoth task of putting together career reports. How would you suggest that an applicant, potential candidate to business schools, assesses and is able to dig deeper to look at perhaps some of the nuances that could often be lost? You know, you could say, well, X% went into this industry, X% over here, or, you know, this particular company, to really then be able to explore roles, functions, and you know, what's perhaps hidden inside some of the bigger headlines.
Right, that's an excellent question, because there's a lot of data to look at, right? And it's very structured and similar across schools. The numbers are different, but the structure purposely looks the same, you know, so that we're all reporting on the same factors. Assuming you have a sense of what it is you want to do, even if it's a relative sense, I think there's an advantage to exploring those programs that seem most likely to help people launch successful careers in those particular industries or geographies or whatever it is. And that's a great starting place. But then I think there's much from there to dig deeper into, and whether this is actually contained or surrounding the report or something you do when you start to visit campuses and explore schools. I think there's still a lot of value in going in person when you can, now that things are a little better in our climate, and we can do that to absorb the culture, understand yourself well enough to know what are the environments in which you learn the best, in which you flourish, and which schools tend to be more attuned to those sort of environments. But then also, where do you want to push yourself? You know, for example, we'll fall back to the intelligent future and the analytical sort of reputation of Tepper. We attract many students who don't have that background, but have the aptitude for it because they want to purposely push themselves to become a little more analytical. They don't necessarily want a career where they're crunching numbers all day, but when someone hands them those numbers, they're able to interpret them, right? So I guess what I'm getting at here is start with the data, look where the obvious matches are, but then really you're looking at it's almost like a dating philosophy to me. You're looking for a place where, you know, you're comfortable yet pushed a little bit and kind of driven to be curious and test your limits.
Hey, any advice you can give on the dating game? We'll have a whole new webinar on that one.
I married my prom date, don't ask me.
If I'd looked at an Anderson career report 10 years ago, you know, there wouldn't be companies like Netflix in there. So Meth, it's also perhaps this idea of how they're then adapting, you know, new industries emerge. You were talking about, you know, entertainment tech that come through. So how do you give your students and, you know, graduates just that sense of being open and then able to pivot and adapt as industries ebb and flow?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love the dating analogy. I think Anderson has a strategic focus to essentially build transformative leaders, kind of with the grounding of particular characteristics. This is very visionary. So what we try to help students to become ultimately is a leader that is emotionally intelligent, a leader that is analytically adept, a leader that has strong kind of industry acumen. But at the same time, to what was kind of alluded before, like, leading with empathy, leading kind of approaching problems from a place of empathy and being purpose driven. I think these are kind of the characteristics we try to strive for in terms of building or incorporate or essentially building as a capability in the students who graduate from here. And so that's visionary. So given that's the ultimate goal, we take it now back to the student that we meet today and really try to discuss and figure out what are your personal values, what are your personal skill set, what are your motivators, and really try to understand their characteristics. And the idea is once you have a better sense of that, then you go out into the marketplace to see, to essentially use any opportunity you get, any platform you get, whatever job role that is kind of priority in the short term, use that as the platform to grow those capabilities. And ultimately, I think if you approach your career in that way, you're going to be flexible, you're going to be adaptable, and you're going to approach the ever-evolving kind of landscape of our economy and the workplace in a much more adaptable way. And I think that's the philosophy that we're trying to really teach through our programming and through our coaching.
Right, so that flexibility and adaptability, if I look at the class of 2022, Jeff, they were in the fall of 2019 sending in their applications. They've done the GMAT or the GRE. They get the offer from Darden. We hadn't heard about wet markets in Fudan and how the world was about to be turned upside down, and now they're coming into this near record job market. So as you reflect on 12 years, Lehman Brothers, the financial crisis, would you say that you're always better off with an MBA from a top business school than without?
Oh, absolutely. I think one of the greatest gifts a human can give themselves is the gift of education, and increasing your knowledge, increasing your learning. Going to a residential MBA program like we all have, where you are immersed in the experience. Darden is known for the best education experience, and I agree that this a residential experience gives optimal learning from your classmates, from the faculty, from just the general experience of spending 21 months or 22 months fully immersed into the experience. And I, like I said at the very beginning, you can't give yourself a better gift. And I sort of dismiss the reports that the MBA is becoming old news. It's only old news, I think, to those that don't have the degree, because if you've got the degree, you know how transformative it is, whether that transformation occurs right at business school or, in my case, 20 years later. I still look back at the experience that I had in the late 90s, and it has really shaped who I am as an individual or as a person, and the type of organization that I run and lead. The degree is extraordinarily transformational by how it's set up, and I encourage everybody to really think about it and jump in, because it is an investment that you'll never regret.
Jeff, and I would just add to that the community, right? I know you were alluding to this as well, but particularly if you're considering joining a program where you didn't do your undergrad, for example, it's just that whole new alumni network that you have access to. So I couldn't agree with everything you said more, and I would just add the community element to that as well.
Well, Jeff talks about a gift, Carly. That community is a gift also, and that sense of belonging and camaraderie and support. Do you also see the gift in terms of individuals, perhaps sometimes less tangible, but they're able to reflect. I just feel more confident, or the way that they approach their career and life.
Absolutely. One of the ways that I've heard our career services profession defined is helping you communicate your value to an employer, right? And that's helpful for you if you're doing a residential full-time program or a professional program. But we really see, I think in our roles, Meth, Steve, Jeff, and I, we really see the difference between the first year and the second year, right? Onboarding complete. I've had a chance to go out and communicate my story in different ways to different individuals. I've had a chance to prove my value at a Fortune 500 firm in many cases, in the case of our 2-year students who complete internships. And it's really, speaking to Jeff's point, it truly is a transformation. And for me, working closely with the students, it's a different person, right? I welcome back a different student after that summer between their first and second year in the case of a 2-year program. And that really has to do about confidence and some of that tough love that you asked Steve about earlier. And just all the honest feedback they've had all year from me, their professors, their peer mentors, and then in many cases, their first private sector, possibly bosses over the summer. And they're really able to look through new lenses when it comes to the selection of their first post MBA role, and hopefully keep that level of confidence later on. But it's almost a comical difference, if you will, between how they approach us in that first year and then sort of watching them interact with the new green first years and how they can sort of impart advice and also a little bit of calmness over the new students. It's almost a proud parent moment for those of us in the career services profession.
I was going to say, you must see it as like an extended family, and very proud of watching that growth and development that you then witness. Jeff had talked about, just the long-term future of the MBA. At the same time, Steve, there are a growing number of specialized master's business programs. I think we had colleagues on for the product manager masters that Tepper offers with the computer science school. So do you think there'll be an impact on the MBA market with the alternative specialized masters now available?
I think there is, and then how schools manage it is a separate question, right? So I think for folks who want to make a quicker change, perhaps a more narrower change, some of these programs are incredibly well aligned with that. Our product management degree is a good example that you mentioned. We have folks in that degree my office supports, as well as MBAs pursuing product management jobs. And the way I would differentiate between the two for a prospective student or an employer would be the folks in the product management degree are typically building upon previous experience. They're a little more experienced. They're honing in on these skills to become a senior product manager or a lead of product management, or maybe even a head of product at a company, versus the MBA, which, as Jeff and others have said, there's really nothing yet replacing it as a broad-based credential with a set of skills and experiences that most people acknowledge are common across. Our programs are all quite different, but when you say an MBA, you have a sense of what that person brings to the table. So it's more of a generalist degree, someone with more organizational leadership goals, right? They'll be well prepped for that. And it's still, in my opinion, one of the best credentials to pivot your career. It's almost assumed that you will have a pivot when you receive your MBA. And I tell prospective students there are very few other opportunities, especially if you find yourself in a bit of a box after 5 or 6 years in a particular path. The MBA lets you break out of that box. So both have value, but they really need to be aligned with the goals of the student.
Right. And with that pivot, Meth, some students might define it in terms of a specific job title. I want to be a VP at this company, and here's the career path. Perhaps initially more than, well, what kind of person do you want to be, and the leader that you want to develop into? There's room for both, right? And this is part of the incredible work that all 4 of your schools are doing to think about, next steps in my career, but also as an individual, that sense of purpose and who you want to be.
I agree with that point, which is, ultimately, kind of goes back to what I was referring to earlier, as far as like, what kind of leader do you want to become? When students graduate from all our institutions here, they're taking up manager positions and above, right? Like as they grow in their career, they're taking up leadership executive positions. And ultimately, I think it's very important to think about what kind of leader you want to become, and what kind of legacy you want to leave behind. I think that's very critical to talk about even early on, as they come in and embark on this MBA journey. It's very important to define, what ultimately do you care about, what's important to you, and why, and really get into the details behind that conversation and really understand, what causes do you care about, what problems do you want to solve, and how would you like to engage, and ultimately leave what kind of legacy do you want to leave behind. And that is a combination of like a lot of different things that we discussed so far, as being emotionally intelligent, being adaptable, being innovative, and being able to navigate a diverse workforce. And you can define diversity in many different respects, but being able to navigate, align, persuade, influence in that kind of environment is going to be more critical in our evolving world.
Right. A former dean of one of your 4 schools once said to me, "Go where you can do your best work." And I think, just listening to all 4 of you and your insights, but certainly if you've got the support of any of these 4 schools and the wonderful careers teams that you run, that's going to make a great difference of where you go. Those record successes, the outcomes that we were describing at the beginning of this panel, are undoubtedly a reflection of the incredible dedication and the work that you and your teams all do. Hats off to you for everything that you achieve, the fact that MBAs look at this experience with such a positive perspective. And thank you for bringing the CentreCourt MBA Festival to an end on such a thoughtful, such an encouraging, such a go and embrace the world attitude. I think that's a great note to finish. So Jeff and Carly, Meph and Steve, enjoy that event tonight with your Gators. But to all 4 of you, thank you for a great session looking at the incredible opportunities that the MBA will bring.